I've learned a lot of things about life and leadership from dog sled racing that can carry over into professional life. But one of them is if you look at dog sledding equipment, you think at first glance it's very basic and it's very simple. But what you're actually looking at is some of the most elegant technology you will find. And the reason for that is it's been just refined, very purpose-built. So for instance, you look down, it looks like a nylon bag. It's got some carbon fiber shafts. It's got a couple bolts and some ropes and a carabiner. This looks like simple things, but it's extremely elegant. And this is why. Because when you're out on a trail and you've got a lot of dogs and it's 20 below and it's dark, the less things that you have to go wrong, the less bolts, if you can use 3 instead of 10, that's less failure modes.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Don't Do That podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Waltrick, and today I have with me my friend, Mike Betz. Mike is the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Nitrogen. And before you all got on, I was just telling him that I still have to work on remembering nitrogen versus Riskalyze. Do people internally do that too? Welcome, Mike.
Glad to be here.
Thrilled to see you. I am excited about this conversation today because I feel like you are one of the people in our industry who has seen the ins and outs of many of the wealth technology platforms, probably more than most. Yeah?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And from a few different angles as well.
From a few different angles. Yes. Okay. So we're going to get into all of that, guys. So buckle up. I think our conversation with Mike today, we're going to get some insight on the wealth tech platforms that are out there, what he's seeing in terms of an evolution of technology in our space, and what he's seeing from his role as Director of Strategic Partnerships at Nitrogen, where he's responsible for some of the most complex client relationships. And so what are firms asking for and what are they demanding and what are they looking for in their next level of wealth tech firms? So let's start at the beginning, Mike. Tell us about your background so everybody gets a lay of the land.
Yeah, so I lead our team that works with our most complex, largest customers here at Nitrogen. But how I got here, it's been a bit of a journey. So I've been in wealth management for about 20 years, and it's kind of a story of two halves. The first half, I started out as a financial planner and figured out that I actually liked really the operations and all the technology. Turns out there's a lot of technology in wealth management firms. So I kind of went down that path, running firms, operating them, breaking them away, doing those types, even building some from scratch. That was a lot of fun. And the second half is where I went over and joined the wealth tech side with firms like SS&C, Black Diamond, and then a number of startups in the space. So that's led me to Nitrogen, and I really enjoy it. And I think like you said, one of my strengths is I've seen lots of parts of this industry from lots of different seats, so I can connect a lot of dots for folks.
That's amazing. So I feel like, I was talking to someone about this earlier. I feel like we're sitting in the middle of an interesting time for wealth technology, right? AI is, of course, disrupting everything, but you also are seeing more and more PE money flow into the space. You're seeing a decent amount of consolidation. Give me a sense of your view of where we are in this tech evolution that we're seeing.
Wow, that's a broad question, isn't it? Well, I think we're getting to the place where every wealth management firm out there is a technology firm. It needs to think of them as that, but one where they're looking for technology to support what they're doing. And I think where the firms are getting it right, where they're getting it wrong, that the firms are trying to think of a really good experience and how can technology like AI help them with that intent and with that problem, solve those problems, are getting it right. I think where firms are screwing it up sometimes is where they're like, wow, we've got all this technology. How can we jam it into our business? And that's kind of backwards. So I think that we can go a lot of places with AI and technology in general, but that's what I'm seeing. And I think I'm seeing more of a interest in single platforms. These having fragmented data and fragmented stacks becomes more and more difficult to manage and to really get the best out of technology when you have that. So I think you're seeing more firms looking to do more things with fewer vendors.
That's so interesting because I feel like that comes in waves, right? I feel like we had a period of time, at least over the stretch of the last 15 years that I can think of, where the one solutions reign supreme. And then I can also remember a time where everybody was going after the best in class, and they were sure that they were going to be able to integrate them all. And it seems like we've sort of come full circle. And do you think that that's technology fatigue? Do you think that that's, people are down on the ability to integrate? Do you think that's the data? Why do you think we're back to this point?
I think the answer is yes. I agree that I think we've come full circle. When I first started, 20 years ago, it was a lot of all-in-ones because integrations sucked or they didn't exist, or an integration was billed as hey, you can export a file and import it. Well, technically that's an integration, not a very good one. But then we got into some of these APIs, right? SOAP ones and then REST, and they got better and better in what we could do with them. And it really enabled us to mix and match best of breed, but it became very difficult to manage. And now that we have cloud computing and so much data, it becomes really difficult to manage all that. So I think that's where we're coming back to fewer things, doing higher quality things.
Okay, so if we're coming back to fewer things, who is going to win this race? Because we've got like the OG players out there who have massive brand loyalty and have experience and time in their corner. They're large, sit on great data sets, but maybe the tech stacks are a little sleepy underneath. And then you've got these new players that are coming out of the gate, innovating faster than I've ever seen. What is this going to look like?
Well, I think it depends, right? Like there are some firms, large aggregators. I think we're seeing kind of this emergence of some big national brands, right? Huge tech budgets. They're doing that and they're leading the way and they're kind of building their own internal experience, and vendors are helping them support that. And I think a lot of advisors are using that to help make their decisions on where they're going to join, where they're going to break away or join to. And I also think there's a lot of mid-sized firms out there. And, what is a mid-sized firm? I remember when a large firm was $1 billion, it's kind of not anymore. So we kind of need to start with what's a small, medium, large firm. But I think a lot of those firms are looking for help. They don't want to do it all on their own. So they're looking for platforms like Nitrogen to help them put together the best of things, the tools that they need, and figure out how to integrate the newest technologies in there to do it for them. I think that's what firms are looking for. There's always going to be the firms that want to do it themselves, but I think that's kind of going to the wayside. I also think that you're seeing kind of these standalone point solutions or point-in-time solutions that are starting to become features, right? I remember when a rebalancer was a standalone thing with iRebal. Those are kind of platform technologies now. So there's almost has to be some consolidation here where these standalone products will become platform features over time.
Interesting. So I have a couple clients and I sit on a couple of boards of firms, AI firms, that I'm like so jazzed about. I am so intrigued by all of this. They're so native to being able to build so fast and innovate so fast. And it's interesting to see. So firms like Zox, who started out as a note taker and now I think are going to compete in more areas of wealth tech than we realize. Like, do you see challenges ahead of them or benefits to the position that firms like that are in?
Yeah, it's both, right? I think Jump and Zox they were kind of the first ones to do meeting note takers. And I think they're doing exactly what they need to do, which is become more than just a note taker, right? Like, what do you do with that? A lot of advisor interactions, a lot of it is getting ready for a meeting, having a meeting, and then following up from the meeting. That's a huge part of the business. So you get a lot of data. There's a lot of administrative burden there. And they're working that out. They're helping do that and connecting with all the other systems because ultimately advisors just want help doing their job. So I think it's with the developing this, they're almost reinventing the user interface to be not an interface.
Okay, so dealing with some of the most complex firms that Nitrogen serves, give us a lay of the land in terms of challenges that you're seeing that firms like yours are needing to overcome as firms are evolving.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest one is we're doing some really cool things at Nitrogen with AI and the latest technologies. And especially with some of these large networks, they are trying to catch up with how do we analyze this from a security standpoint for how to use this?
Yeah.
We're having doing a lot of education, and these advisors really want all this new things, but we've got to make sure firms feel comfortable with it too. So we spend a lot of time doing that. Nitrogen just got a new ISO certification from one, which is kind of new to our industry, but it's specific to AI. So I think things like that, more and more firms are going to adopt, and that'll help get these firms caught up when they have to approve things, like your big broker dealer networks, for example. I think that's one of the big things we're seeing, one of the big challenges.
Got it. Do you have any insight into where nitrogen's going that you can share with us? What are you allowed to tell us? What's
Yeah,
next?
we just had our conference, a Fearless Investing Summit in Denver a couple of weeks ago, and we announced Nucleus. And what it is not a feature, but it's built in across the platform. So what it does is it's like a chat GPT bot kind of on the side, but it's agentic, which means it doesn't, you don't just ask it, you can tell it to do things for you. So there's lots of features. How do I do this? How do I set up this proposal? You can still do that, but kind of reinventing the user interface is just tell Nucleus to do it and it'll just do it for you. So you don't have to go 16 clicks deep. So I think that's part of reimagining the user interface and features and design.
Okay, so give me some examples. What can Nucleus do for people? It can build proposals.
Yeah. So the first thing that I like is you just ask it, what can you do for me? And it'll give you some ideas, right? I'm using these chatbots all the time and hey, what can you do to help me out? So I think that's where I start. But yeah, you can create clients, send out risk tolerance questionnaires, copy a proposal over, even attach a statement and it'll create a proposal or an analysis for you. Things that it won't do, though, that are really important. You can't tell it to recommend a portfolio or something. It's going to stop you. It's got the rails there to say, hey, we're not trying to replace you. You need to make the decisions on this, but we'll help with all of the administrative things to help you do it and guide you along the way. And I think that's important, the things that it won't do in addition to the things that it does.
So is there a Contio integration in Nitrogen's future?
There is. We're working with that. Aaron Klein is a great friend, obviously our founder, and sits on the board. He's got his own spin on meetings and kind of the meeting OS. And I think that's new, and they're going to figure out what that looks like. But Nitrogen has its own note taker. But I think the unlock is you can't have just one option. You've got to have some flexibility, some unbundling a bit. So fully anticipate working with the other note takers, including Contio. I've got a friend on their beta, kind of the beta test, and it's really neat. It's kind of cool what he's doing with that.
Very cool. I need to get on that beta. I want to see what's going on over there. I feel like, me, and I always have my Fathom in all of my meetings. And it's like one of those things where like, I don't know what life was like before that. There's like only a handful of things in your life where you're like, how did I function before this thing? And that is one for me. Like, I don't know how I made it through my days before this thing was keeping track of everything. So thank God for note takers.
They're huge. I still do this a little bit just because writing things down manually, but it's huge, right? It lets you focus on the conversation, not so much about the follow-ups and all that. It's huge.
Yes, you're so right. I feel like that is actually the best thing that comes of it is that people can be like in the moment and in the conversation versus worrying like, how am I going to remember all the things this person is saying? So true. I don't even think I really thought of that before now because I am so focused on getting the transcripts, making sure I do all the follow-ups, like all the very tactical things. But you're right. It is a beautiful thing to be able to look someone in the eye and not stress in the background about if I have 10 of these conversations this week, how am I going to remember keep it all straight? Yeah.
I think there's another interesting thing. I think we're kind of normalizing it now too. I mean, I remember before the COVID and the pandemic, nobody really wanted to get on a Zoom call and do a virtual meeting. We just didn't feel right about it, but we got over that pretty quick. And I remember when the meeting note takers first came out, folks were kind of like, I don't know about that. I don't know if I'm comfortable with that. I think we're over the tipping point now where folks are not only comfortable with it, but like, hey, that's a good idea. I'm glad I don't have to worry about catching that.
Yeah, I bet you I don't know this to be true because I'd like to think that all my team members unintentionally are very professional, but I bet you it ups everybody's level of professionalism just a little bit too. If you know that somebody's going to walk away with every word you said, you better make sure you choose them wisely, right?
Yeah, yes. And I wonder if that's a good thing or a bad thing in some ways, right? I mean, obviously not every meeting needs to be recorded.
Right.
Maybe some that are better offline, but yeah, I hear what you're saying. I'll bet it does.
Yeah.
And I also think it's interesting where some of the meeting note takers, they don't do a transcript, but they're kind of summarizing it as opposed to a
Mm-hmm.
word recording. So I think that's an interesting kind of version of it there too.
Is there anything else you could think of in our like last 10 years that we're like, how did we function before that? I'm trying to think if there's anything. I don't know.
I can think cloud computing. Honestly, I remember this was in 2015, 2016. We moved offices with the RIA that I was at, and we built a server room, climate controlled, all of that.
Oh my
Why would
gosh.
you do that, right? Not only that, but we wired everything up for Cat5 cables. Why would you do that? You don't need to do these things anymore. So like, we don't think of that anymore. But those are gone. I don't know how we do that. And then
Yeah.
along with that, the data too, right? Storage is like, doesn't matter anymore. It's infinite cheap.
That's so true. Way to just age us, that cloud computing. It's so funny. I tried to explain to my son, what was I trying to explain to him the other day? So we were cleaning out our entertainment center and there were a bunch of movies in there and like DVDs in there. And he's like asking me what these are. And I just had to laugh because I had to explain to my 6-year-old son that like, this is how you used to have to watch movies. You had to go to the store. You had to pick the one you wanted. You had to pay $20 for it, take it home. And then that's it. You had to watch it over and over again because that's the only one you bought. And he was just like shocked by that. And I'm thinking, oh my God, he's 6. So Netflix and Disney are like his life, the apps on the TV. Anyway, silly, but wild times. All right. So, the premise here of this podcast is that we learn better from our mistakes. And I was telling you before we got online that my last guest this has not been aired yet, but he said that the mistake he made was buying a $100,000 technology off of the promise of a roadmap item. And we both made that face, right? Like, oh no, don't do that. But I really do love this because I think it's a nice reminder that we all do silly things. We learn from them. We try not to do them again. So, Mike, what are we not doing today?
Gosh, I think you nailed it there. Like, it's fine to make mistakes. My Lord, I've made so many of them, and I'm okay with that. Some of them stung more than others, right? But try to make new mistakes, right? Like, get the easy stuff right and try to start making mistakes, not the old ones. So there's one that I continually struggle with, and I've got it right, I've got it wrong, and I continue to get it wrong and right. And it's something, I don't know if you can master it or not, but it's confusing complexity for sophistication. And I don't know, it seems like there's these quotes, right? I love little quotes and adages. And when we don't know who to attribute it to, we just attribute it to Mark Twain. So let's just say Mark Twain said, hey, I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one. And I think there's a lot of richness to that, and that plays out in lots of ways. So those are some things in my personal life and my professional life where I've got it wrong, got it right. But I think that's a really important thing, that the simple things where the technology just disappears are actually the most refined things that are the most valuable and the most sophisticated, even though they don't look like it. So I've spent close to 20 years in wealth management, but I've also spent about 20 years in professional dog sled racing, which is kind of why not, right? But one of the things that I've learned a lot of things about life and leadership from dog sled racing that can carry over into professional life. But one of them is, if you look at dog sledding equipment, you think at first glance it's very basic and it's very simple. But what you're actually looking at is some of the most elegant technology you will find. And the reason for that is it's been just refined, very purpose built. So for instance, you look down, it looks like a nylon bag. It's got some carbon fiber shafts. It's got a couple bolts and some ropes and a carabiner. This looks like simple things, but it's extremely elegant. And this is why. Because when you're out on a trail and you've got a lot of dogs and it's 20 below and it's dark, the less things that you have to go wrong, the less bolts. If you can use 3 instead of 10, that's less failure modes. If you use a simple screw carabiner, doesn't freeze up. If you got a clicker one, you might not be able to get that undone. We organize things in the sled bag so you can go with muscle memory. You know where your things are at, because when things go wrong, you kind of got to have the simple is better. It is way better. And it's very high quality materials, but only what you absolutely need in the simplest form and nothing that you don't.
Oh my gosh. Mike, that is the wildest thing. I remember you telling me about that before. And it's just like one of those things that you just don't even believe someone saying that you've been doing that for 20 years. Wow. How? Tell me how you got into it, and then I will really let you go this time.
Yeah, I've always loved dogs.
Yeah.
I have 3 dogs now. I've always had dogs. I will always have dogs in my life. They're awesome. My cousin, we grew up together. She's like a sister to me. She started dating a guy that was in dog sled racing just randomly. And she knew I liked dogs and said, hey, why don't you come check out a race? And then it was, hey, why don't you come help me handle for a race? Where you kind of like the pit crew that follows. And then it was like, hey, we've got some extra dogs. We could put together a team. Do you want to try running a team? And then it just kind of took on a life of its own. I even spent a winter, over a decade ago in the UP, running a dog sled camp, training. I was the farmhand at a Iditarod dog sled camp for a winter. So I learned a lot about that, about snow. And that was the toughest job that I've had until the end physically.
Are you really good?
What? No, I'm mediocre. There are people that have been doing this for generations, and I learn a lot from them, but there's most mushers that are really professionals. We say that it's more of a lifestyle than a sport, and that's truly, truly true.
So it's funny that you say that, because I am definitely someone, and this is a blessing and a curse, but I get to the end faster than, at least in my domain, get to the end faster while people are still trying to figure it out. And I'm, so making things more complex is like my nemesis. I'm like, come on. No, we got here 10 minutes ago. And my husband, I would say, is very much aligned with what you are saying, in that he starts with the complex and then gets to the simple. So do you have people in your life who are the opposite of this as well? And is it like an opposite subtract thing? Because I'm wondering if my husband and I are going to continue to duke it out over this.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's preferences, right? Like I'm kind of like you, and it turns out there's a lot of executives that are maybe like us as well, where there's this concept called bottom line up front, right? Where you start with the punch. We all love stories, and we like to go long and kind of try to justify our value and all the work that we did. But really, sometimes the most effective thing is to just lead with the punchline and then back everything up. That's one that I learned really difficult. That was a really difficult one. Can I share a story on that one?
Yeah, please do.
I a consulting project with one of the largest firms in the country. And we ended up doing, I don't know, it was like this 40 or 50 page slide deck, right? And we had the executive team and we went through the whole story. And, then we got to the end. Here's the problem. Here's what we went through, all that. And after that, the head of the top executives basically said, Mike, like the work that you did, but let me teach you something. It's called BLUF, BLUF, bottom line up front. Just give me the bottom line, and then everything else. You're actually going to be more credible if you just tell me, like, look, 1 slide, what's the problem? 2, what should we do about it, right? And that was kind of an eye-opening thing for me. So I tried to do that in lots of areas of my life, and I think it's more efficient and effective. And it's kind of counterintuitive to how you think, where I have to kind of lay everything out, organize it, and go through it, and I tell the story to myself. But that's my first draft. I then need to refine it and then flip it when I'm communicating with a lot of other people. So that's one I learned the really hard way.
Okay, I've never heard bottom line up front before, so I kind of love that. So here's the thing, being a bottom line up front person who gets to the end before, there are downsides to that. Because back to my husband example, he's more thoughtful. He's played through the scenarios in his head, where I've just picked one and started running towards it. So I think that there's a good balance of both to be found in these things. but I believe it to be true that you're either one or the other. You're either the one that's going to pick one, make the mistake and still get there faster, or you're going to do it really thoughtfully and get to the right, I don't know. But that's my life that I live at my home every single day, Mike.
So the thing that I'm there with you. One of the things that I learned quite a few years ago was called the Kolbe method or the Kolbe analysis. And
Yeah.
if you're familiar with it, you definitely know the concepts where
Yeah.
in one of the modes, there's 4 modes, right? And one of them is fact finders. And there is no bad score. It's just how do you operate? And sometimes certain profiles of people work better at some tasks than others. Like, for instance, it sounds like you are a low fact finder. That's not a knock. It's just basically saying, hey, I'm comfortable with ambiguity. I don't need all the information to move forward with a decision. And
for better or worse, for sure.
Better or worse, right? So depending on what you're dealing with, like, look, you probably don't want like a rocket scientist being a low fact finder, right? So it all depends, and you got to balance each other out. And I think just knowing those things, it's a communication tool. Realize who you're talking to. Someone needs all the information. Well, then you kind of got to lay it out for them. But someone like you, someone like me, like the BLUF, top-down communication, do that, and then we'll ask questions.
Do that. I think, oh my gosh, I love that acronym. Like, I'm taking that with me forever. I think that's amazing. And I think when you have worked, I think it comes with working with executives. And that's the point in your career where you're like, they don't have the time. They don't have the time to figure out all the minutia. They want the most important things, and they want to know you know what you're doing. So when you get to that point, like, you realize it's really the only way. But up until that, you're right. You do think more is better. So I think it's like a career maturity thing, right?
Well, it is, no question. And it took me way longer to learn that than it should have. But I was thinking, well, why is that? And I don't know, but I remember going back like in grade school, middle school, it was always college even, like you have to write a paper. It's got to be at least 10 pages, right? So we've got this false sense that longer is better. And it's not. And I think that's one of the big disconnects between academia and like real life business world.
Real life. Because it's funny, you and I were talking before we got on here. I think sometimes my favorite conversations come before we get online about how, there aren't enough hours in the day. So the 10-pager is just not reality in most cases.
No.
Even if we wanted to, there's no time for that.
That 40-page deck that I was talking about, what it should have been was about 5 slides, and everything else is an appendix. And those 5 slides, there's this thing called action titles I learned, where you should get the top, like the premise, like if someone was scanning the deck and the only thing they read was the title of the slide, they should be able to kind of understand where you're getting to. And I thought that was really, really interesting. So I continue to use that too.
I've never said this out loud, but when we got acquired, I learned that exact thing when I was at eMoney and we got acquired by Fidelity, because the Fidelity people who were doing that deal, I was so enamored. Shout out to Stephen Langlois and team. I was so like in love with the way that they presented information. And that is exactly it. Their headlines were the whole story. If you just read that. And I was just like, and that is now, funny enough, like a guiding thing in all that I do in marketing too. Like, make sure if they just read this, that they're going to get it. It's that simple. Okay, so what other things are we making too complex?
What else? What else are we making too complex? I think we make a lot of things, maybe even most things, too complex. So here's one, for example.
Okay.
I think we over romanticize how much impact these really complicated things do, where kind of the foundational things, core things, simple things, just done extraordinarily well, have really outsized impact. For instance, I'm an organizer. That's how my brain works. I need to organize things before I can start working on it. Whether that's in my workshop, you'll see how all my things tools are organized. May not be the cleanest, but it is very tidy. And that's how I work. And I think that makes it easier for a lot of people to work. And I think it goes for advisors and their clients too. And I've said for a long time, there's this kind of the shoebox principle. And I learned it with my mom way back in the day, where maybe not anymore, but maybe it's a digital shoebox, but a client or a prospect brings in all their stuff, right? Like it's just jammed with papers, envelopes that they didn't even open. And if the only thing that an advisor did was help them organize that shoebox, explain what this stuff is, just simple, and keep it organized, if that's the only thing they've done, they've added a tremendous amount of value. That's it. So I think just things like that have outsized impact.
Yeah, it's interesting. I can relate to that on the marketing side. I have, between 10 and 20 prospect conversations on a weekly basis. And the majority of firms would benefit so much from doing the basics right and doing it consistently. But everybody wants to jump to, how do I get leads the cheapest? So I have constant conversations about have to do the simple. You have to do the things that seem simple. Well, it's like shooting a free throw. It's like you got to be able to shoot a free throw. Nobody's blocking you. Do that right. Do that well. I will never forget my coaches being like, shoot 100 more until you hit more of them. That's all things. It's like you got to do the simple things without the barriers really well and really consistently, and that sort of earns you the right to do the more complex and the more sophisticated things.
Absolutely does. And there's this is another principle I learned. It's called the Kano analysis or Kano model. It's basically saying that one of the hardest things is silent expectations. And there's things people don't even ask for because they just expect them. There's things that people ask for and you do them. And there's things, the delighters that nobody asks for, but you do them anyway. And they're kind of a surprise. But you can't delight your way out of silent expectations. And so I'm staying in Vegas for a hotel this week for a conference, and it's great. But let's just imagine you're in a hotel. There are no amount of chocolates on your pillow that are going to make up for a cold shower. It just doesn't work. So I think you need to remember that. And even doing some of those silent expectation things really, really well, make them noticed. So for instance, I have business cards. I'm like, well, yeah, I'll get some business cards. They're very, very simple and they're heavy. They're like almost like a beer coaster heavy. It's a simple business card, right? But when I hand that to someone, they're like, whoa, there's this perception we extrapolate importance from heavy, right? Just heavy copy paper even, or even like heavy cutlery. There's science that says the meal tastes better if you have heavy cutlery. So I think there's some really interesting things we can do with the basics that can turn them into things you wouldn't expect.
I feel like you should be on Jeopardy, Mike. The amount of things you've just taught me in this phone conversation, you're my pick for Jeopardy. Let's get you on there.
I don't know if Jeopardy's my jam, but I'm a pretty good like bar trivia. Like you want me on that. And I don't know, I'm just resourceful. Some of my friends call me Mike Guyver because
I could see that.
Of all this stuff, right? And a lot of it's I've learned kind of the hard way over the years, and you figure out you just accumulate all these things that you've learned and tools and tips and tricks. It hasn't always been easy, but I guess I have some of that to show for it.
Okay, what was BLUF again? Bottom
right.
Oh, yes. Okay.
And it's an acronym, but the principle is called top-down communication.
Less fun. I like the acronym. Okay, so guys, listeners, so today what we learned from Mike is that we're not going to overcomplicate simple things, and we're going to do the simple things well because there's a huge unlock in that, right? Is that what you're telling us?
It is, yeah. And I think it has to do with AI and process too. We want to jump into AI, but AI is really good at executing. But if you got a crappy process and you didn't do a process map to start with, you got to start there and do that really, really well. And it'll unlock all the things downstream from that.
It's so funny you say that because I was thinking that the whole time. I was thinking, because I'm just like everybody else. I'm mapping all the things in our business to figure out how do we streamline externally and internally. And as you were talking, I was thinking, man, I got to start with the basics because I am probably overcomplicating something that doesn't need to be overcomplicated, like the whole rest of the world right now, who's racing to figure this out as if there's a finish line in front of us anytime soon. All right. Well, thanks to you, I'm going to be thinking about all the things that I overcomplicate for the rest of the day. And I'm also going to be more acutely aware of more polar opposites between me and my husband. I'll go home and make sure that I remind him of that. But anyway, it was really nice to have you. I always like to see you. So fun. You're one of the good ones.
You guys are always up to something cool, so I always like catching up.
Oh, I appreciate that. And my team had a ball at the Nitrogen Conference, so thanks for hosting them. Although Tina does have a ball pretty much everywhere she goes, as you know. She brings the party with her.
She is the ball. So
She is the ball. That is so true. That is so true. All right, Mike. Well, I so appreciate you. This was great. We are not going to overcomplicate simple things, and we're going to get the unlock from doing the simple things right. I feel like that is a message that I'm going to take to my team today for sure. And BLUF. I'm going to remember BLUF until the end of time. So thank you for that too.
You're welcome.
I'll see you soon.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's show, subscribe to be notified when new episodes become available. And please consider giving us a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. This podcast is sponsored by Intentionally, a financial services growth engine design consultancy and agency. If you want to learn more, please email me at kelly@growintentionally.com. Thank you again for listening, and check back to hear what we're not doing next.
The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Kelly Waltrick. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only.